Now, please welcome to the Symposium stage the first ever property management panel to discuss trends in property ownership and management. First, panel moderator Jim Shipman of Colliers, Candace Ranson-Hartman with TOK Commercial, Justin Vogel, Raffinelli and Nahas, Tammy Cox, Cushman and Wakefield, and Kobe Barlow with Oppenheimer Development Corporation.
All right, well, we are scheduled to finish about 4:15, so where'd the time go? Thank you, everybody. I'm Jim Shipman with Colliers, managing owner of Colliers, and this is the first property management panel with BOMA. And so just to start off, I want to introduce our group. We'll start with Kobe and let everybody know who you are and what you're all about.
Well, they're about to. I'm Kobe Barlow. I'm with Oppenheimer Development Corporation. I'm their property and operations manager and have just hit my 20-year mark there. So.
Justin Vogel with Raffinelli and Nahas, the portfolio manager.
Tammy Cox with Cushman Wakefield. I do commercial property management, of course. I've been doing property management for almost 30 years. I was 12 when I started. So.
Candace Ranson-Hartman. I'm with TOK Commercial. I've been with TOK since 2006. I oversee our senior property managers and participate in the property management leadership at TOK.
All right, and I just, Scott Shaner made me promise not to let Justin off the hook. He didn't mention that he got engaged in the last few weeks, so congratulations, Justin.
Oh.
So we're going to start talking today a little bit. We started off talking about the market. I don't know if folks paid attention to the market today. The latest inflation report came out and was higher than anticipated. So it's been something we've been dealing with for the last year and a half or so. And I know a lot of people focus on that, on what it's doing from the brokerage standpoint. How does that impact, investment sales and development and a lot of different opportunities that have slowed down. But from the property management standpoint, I just wanted to throw it out to the panel and in this time of rising costs. And what are you all seeing? Justin, we'll start with you. What are the types of things, the impacts that it's having on your operations?
The biggest increases or impacts that we're seeing, property taxes, labor-intensive services, insurance, and utilities, make up a big part of our operating expenses that either get absorbed by the owner or pass through to the tenants. So it's definitely something that we're focusing on.
I think this winter we've probably also seen maybe not an inflationary impact, but we had the third or fourth snowiest month in Idaho's history. So, Tammy, do you see a big increase in costs there?
Sure. As a matter of fact, we just are closing our January books, and I had to go back to probably 10 or 12 of the budgets and ask to increase the snow removal, because we would be off the whole year. And I got a lot of buy-off with the owners, and then, of course, that increases the triple nets for the tenants, which is not a fun conversation, but, it's part of the deal with the triple nets.
Seeing the same things, Candace?
Yeah, snow removal invoices are fun. Basically, you want to keep copies of them is what we've learned. I think, 12 months from now, we'll be doing reconciliations and hitting the tenants with those charges. And so I think we try to make sure that we capture the weather reports, capture the invoices, and make sure that we can remind tenants that we actually did have quite a bit of snow. They tend to get a little amnesia after about 12 months.
Pictures can be helpful too.
Yeah, pictures, all of it. So yeah, just documentation.
Right.
It's important.
Right. And I think we all saw in the pandemic take away an inordinate amount of snow in a month, but snow removal costs were something that, due to labor shortages, they increased dramatically even on a regular snow year. It would have been something that we would have seen. What type of increases are you all feeling, overall on a CAM basis, if you will, as a result of both, whether it's snow removal or the inflation and insurance and other things?
So I think property taxes, we've seen property taxes go up between 15%. I know at some industrial buildings we've seen as high as 40% in 2024, obviously for the 2023 year. Insurance costs we've seen go up about 30%. That's due to construction costs. It's due to aging buildings that haven't been updated, and your owner or our owners, are not always spending the money on those updates. And then it's also due to just natural disasters happening in the insurance industry, and so that's kind of jacking everything up.
Yeah, we've seen that across the country. Insurance companies not willing to insure in certain places, and then places like Idaho where we may not have as many insurable events or
Yep.
natural disasters, but we're bearing the cost of that to support other areas of the country that have really struggled with it. So we've seen big increases. So with that, there obviously for tenants, there's two aspects for most tenants to their rent: their base rent and then their common area costs. And with all these increases, are we seeing a lot more vacancies? What are you seeing in the? Is this driving folks away, or what? What are the results in Idaho?
Office space, available space 5,000 square feet and less, there's not a whole lot available. Anything less than 5,000 square feet, vacancies are getting snagged up pretty quickly. I think it's the larger square footage blocks that are going to be tougher to lease. But yeah, knock on wood, office market seems fairly strong for smaller spaces.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Justin. I think our average for downtown vacancy is less than 10%. When you look at a lot of other markets around us, that's a pretty impressive number to be able to maintain here in Boise. And I think that has a lot to do with people still being interested and wanting to be in Boise and be in their, the downtown core. I know, recently, we talked about over at, River Shore, a couple of, large tenants had gone into that property over there that are, kind of offshoots of needs from Micron, so we're fortunate with some of the growth we have around us and people still wanting to be in Boise, that it's helping us keep that vacancy rate low.
Yeah, there's no question the demand is still there, and I think, across most sectors, we're still seeing very low vacancy rates when you compare on a national or even regional basis to other cities, particular cities that we compete with. So while those inflationary pressures are there, the costs are increasing. We're still at a point where we're maintaining. I think one of the questions, and I was asked a couple of times before this, is with that, are you finding a lot of competition based on, or tenants moving based on, not rents, but on their common area costs? Are you finding tenants looking for or focusing on those more and looking to move elsewhere? And what are folks doing? I'd be curious, particularly, Justin and Kobe, from a owner operator, so, what are you finding as far as that you're doing to compete with those rising costs?
I'm not seeing tenants moving because of operating expenses. We do a pretty good job of managing those expenses. We take on projects to whatever we can do to reduce those expenses. A couple projects we've did LED lighting retrofits in the building to help bring energy costs down, bidding out contracts, and really just keeping good relationships with our tenants. having a great relationship with our tenant, it's not worth it for them to move for, a few cents or $1 a square foot. So, that's something that we really concentrate on.
I think initially they look at that. I think initially they might be looking at the common area expenses and how does that compare to some of the other buildings. But it just depends on location, right? I think some of the larger offices that are repurposing their space and doing like plug and play are probably getting leased up faster. But I wouldn't say in our market that, like we talked about, that there's a ton of that kind of vacancy. We're just an anomaly.
I think there definitely has been somewhat of a migration, but what I'm seeing is kind of a migration to quality. As some of the larger tenants have downsized a little bit, there's been some availability of some Class A office, and tenants are looking for those amenities, they're looking for those locations, and if you do have a property that you've been able to keep up and keep relevant and still kind of maintain your operating costs, the controllable cost, as Justin mentioned, bidding things out, keeping buildings energy efficient, that goes a long ways to be able to compete against some of the B and C class properties. And so I think there has been a kind of a migration to quality.
Are you finding more, for all of you, finding more owners, landlords doing more upgrades, more conversions to more cost-efficient systems? Is the pressure there from tenants to do that?
I think from an insurance standpoint, they have to start if they haven't already. We're seeing that insurance companies are coming to the table and saying, what does your deferred maintenance look like? What does your preventative maintenance look like? What is the documentation you're going to be able to provide in order to make sure that your owner is doing those things? So if they haven't started, they probably should, because I think, we're looking 6, 9, 12 months out at the insurance for next year. And it's going to be, providing a lot of documentation on those 25-plus-year-old buildings, just to kind of let the insurance company know what our game plan is.
So what you're saying is, the insurance companies, as they continue to increase their costs, they want us to reduce the other costs so we can keep their costs higher.
Yes, and that's going to be tough.
Yeah. A few of your answers, you've talked about the larger spaces, smaller spaces moving more. Is the new to market, is that gone right now? Some of these larger spaces, or what are you doing, or what are you seeing folks do with some of these larger spaces? Is there more demising and trying to lease smaller, or how are you approaching that?
We're trying to take a look at with a huge square, a huge space, you can only divide it down so much. I think what we need to do is try to make the building as attractive as possible. So we build in as many amenities to have high quality Class A projects to try to attract those tenants. There's not a lot of 20, 30, 40,000 square foot users out there, so you want to be the shiniest penny that you can be.
Or you just put a pickleball tenant in all of the larger spaces.
Yeah.
What's pickleball? I haven't heard of that.
I'll tell you later.
Okay, all right, thanks. With the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of talk about occupancy versus actual utilization, right? That we may have said, well, the vacancy rate is still low, but we still had a bunch of empty spaces because people weren't actually utilizing them. What are you seeing on the office side now? Where are we back to? Are we back? Are we still a long ways to go? What are you seeing from a utilization standpoint?
I think it's kind of a weird mix. It appears that, the majority of tenants that we deal with are back in the office. Even though they're back in the office, you see, mixes of hybrid, people that are there on, Tuesdays and Thursdays or, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you go through the spaces and, they don't feel as full. They don't feel like, they have the same amount of pressure in a building. I think that does have some effect on some of the retail, tenants in the downtown area. But the majority of our tenants are back in the office.
I think the smaller tenants are the ones that are in the office using their space. The larger tenants are usually, or what I'm seeing, are the national tenants. Decisions are being made outside of Idaho, so they're vacating space, or they're moving to a hybrid model. So, the smaller square footage, it's being used. That's, why we have that low vacancy rate with that smaller square footage, and, it's the larger space I think is a little bit tougher.
I'm not a broker, but I would say that some of the bigger offices that have had, the pre and post pandemic are planning for more heads in the spaces. So they're asking us to, gross up what the expenses will be with this many heads in there, and based on the badging and the technology that we can monitor, how do we take a look at that to forecast and move into these bigger spaces?
Yeah, I think, Justin, to your point, during the pandemic, obviously a lot of those larger and national, Idaho was different. We were back quicker, more readily back to the office, but a lot of those decisions were driven from offices elsewhere, where they may have still been on lockdowns or shutdowns or whatever the terminology was. And so that impacted offices here, because they couldn't say, well, we're going to be closed in New York and Chicago, but you have to be in the office in Idaho. But I think we have, most of the reports that I've seen is that the utilization is climbing. We're certainly not back to that pre-pandemic level, but well, shifting gears a little bit on, from what's happening in the space, I'm curious as property managers, the role of property managers certainly has evolved, and I'd be curious to what, Candace, maybe starting with you, talking about what you were doing a few years back versus how you're doing it now, how you see your role changing as a property manager.
Well, my first role in 2006 was filing. I don't think people do that anymore. So we don't, no filing. But I think, this kind of leads to technology, and we're all kind of talking about how AI plays a role in property management, or at least property managers are. So we've seen just kind of an increase in going out and looking at what's available. I know AI can play a part in coding, which TOK is we actually just implemented that about, 30, 60, 90 days. We're kind of in that 90-day mark. It's hit or miss, right? And it's new, so we're all in that environment where we're trying things out and trying to figure out the technology. Right now, I wouldn't say we're all loving it. It's supposed to save time and read your invoice and process, super quickly, and we're going through kind of a bumpy road there. So yeah, technology is ever evolving. We're the group, and all of the property managers in the audience are the group that gets to experience, AI as it comes on board. But I think the message on AI is learn to pivot really quickly. If it's not working, you need to either go back to the way you were doing it or find a different way of doing it. But we're just kind of in the exploration phase.
Right.
And I think it's important too to make sure that we're maintaining those relationships with our tenants, our vendors, our owners, and everybody else, that that this technology isn't replacing that, so that we're still staying integrally involved in the day-to-day operations, keeping those good relationships, because I think that's what's going to be the most important in renewing the tenants and doing what we can do to keep costs down too.
Yeah, our role has evolved from, when we initially were a property manager. I like WAG's 10, quotes that he did, because that's what we do as property managers every day. We're continually, trying to multitask and, have exceptional service, keep costs down, keep the tenants happy. Lots of times the leases, they don't understand, even though they've signed them. So we just wear a ton of different hats these days.
Are you finding, I'm hearing a lot of, particularly with the economic changes and concerns over the past 12, 18 months, owners are more involved or more, questioning more? Are you seeing, wanting updates more regularly because they're worried about what, if tenants are staying, or if they're late on rent, they may be, owners may be a little more nervous. Are you seeing that trend?
I mean, I think they were way more involved when we had the downturn because a lot of them took it in-house. And then they realized that they really do need a professional to do it. And, I would say it's half and half. I think once owners get in and learn what's happening with the building, they can pretty much see it based on their financials if they look at them. So, I don't know. What are you seeing, Candace?
I think, I agree with Tammy. I think in a downturn, your manager or your owner is kind of paying a little bit more attention to the budget, what the deferred maintenance is, what money is coming out of their pocket that you're going to go to them and ask them for. I don't see a downturn yet. I think the message is our buildings are full. I think the message is we are wearing a lot of hats and we're doing a good job. And despite AI and technology, I agree with Justin. It's getting in front of your tenants, building a relationship with your tenants, and that in turn. If your buildings are full and your tenants are paying rent, your owner isn't digging into too much.
Right.
You're doing a good job. So.
I'm going to leave you two out of it because your owners are probably sitting here, and so I don't want them questioning what you're doing or you talking about how hard they are to work with. But
no, if we keep our tenants happy, they're paying rent, and paying rent, we're able to pay bills. The owners are happy. We're extending leases. So again, it's just keeping good relationship.
I agree, and as you mentioned, we're fortunate. I consider it to have owners that are active and a part of what we do daily. They see the challenges that we have and the hurdles that we're trying to get over, and it can be really supportive when you have them that active. But it's also the ideas that they come up with and can help us grow in what we do and get their support. So. I think it's kind of cheating having super active owners, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
Quickly, we talked a little bit, I know, Candace, you touched a bit on AI, and obviously everybody, that's the buzzword in everybody's mind from a technology standpoint. But as your roles evolved and the fast pace that we're in now where communications need to be instant, are there other evolving technologies or things that you all are finding that are really helpful, whether it's communicating with your owners or your tenants, whether it's online or is it still, face-to-face is the best?
One of the main things is, when tenants have complaints is to touch them right away. And so having an online work order system, email, all of that. Teams came out, and so we're able to get on Teams calls with our tenants and our owners and connect everybody much more efficient than we've ever been able to. And so that's really helpful. That's kind of what I'm seeing.
It's a double-edged sword because they can contact you a lot quicker, too.
Well, no, I was telling Candace, with our teams, we can see who's calling, and we say, decline, and then we can see the email, and we can decide if we want to take it or delegate it somewhere else.
Any other thoughts on the changing roles for the property manager before we wrap up here?
From a technology standpoint, we're using GPS on, for our maintenance guys, and so we can get to those issues a little quicker because we can see where our maintenance guys are,
right,
and dispatch them quicker. We've noticed that tenants are wanting to text more, and so if they text to our direct line, we actually get that number come into our email or into our program. So. Everything's quicker, everything's faster. We're having to react a little bit quicker and faster, and there's that expectation that you're reacting relatively quickly because of technology as well. So that's my parting thought.
No, I agree. And part of it's keeping up with the technology as it comes out. It seems like about the time I really get a good grasp on a new program, then the newer, better one came out. Maybe I'm a little slow at catching up with the programs, but part of that is keeping up with the technology as it keeps out, and some of it is leasing, lease management, the billing. I mean, you can do that all online now. There's web portals, as they kind of mentioned. There's a lot of ways to interact with the tenants, and the second part of that is keeping up on your building technology. I'm replacing systems in the buildings that I've already replaced, and I look at the calendar, and it seems like we just did that, but it was 20 years ago, and you think about how much software has changed. If anybody had a 20-year-old cell phone, they'd get laughed out of the room, but we have to also realize that with buildings as we upgrade them, that software is newer, it's better, and keeping up with it is a big deal.
And it's making our buildings more efficient. Efficiency is cost effective, and again, just controlling those operating expenses.
Absolutely. The more efficient, the more savings to the tenants,
Yeah.
the more attractive the property. So, it benefits everybody. Well, I want to thank our group. We have a few extra minutes, but we're a little bit behind schedule to start with. We started a little bit later, but do want to throw it out if there are any questions. I know Christian, if he's available, if anybody has a question, if you want to raise your hand and let Christian know. If not, we're here to answer any questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap up and turn over to the next speaker.
Okay.
And we can't see you out there, so.
Good.
Okay, well, see ya. No.
Exactly. All right. Well, I want to thank the panel. Appreciate everybody's inputs. We've got some of the best property managers in the Valley sitting up here, and appreciate all of your time. And with that, we will turn it back over and move on to the next speaker.
Okay.